Emergency evacuation is the urgent immediate egress or escape of people away from an area that contains an imminent threat, an ongoing threat or a hazard to lives or property. Examples range from the small-scale evacuation of a building due to a storm or fire to the large-scale evacuation of a city because of a flood, bombardment or approaching weather system, especially a tropical cyclone. In situations involving hazardous materials or possible contamination, evacuees may be decontaminated prior to being transported out of the contaminated area. Evacuations may be carried out before, during, or after disasters such as. Emergency evacuation plans are developed to ensure the safest and most efficient evacuation time of all expected residents of a structure, city, or region. A benchmark evacuation time for different hazards and conditions is established. These benchmarks can be established through using best practices, regulations, or using simulations, such as modeling the floor of people in a building, to determine the benchmark. Proper planning will use multiple exits, contra-flow lanes, and special technologies to ensure full, fast and complete evacuation. Consideration for personal situations which may affect an individual's ability to evacuate is taken into account, including alarm signals that use both oral and visual alerts, and also evacuation equipment such as sleds, pads, and chairs for non-ambulatory people. Considering the persons with a disability during an emergency evacuation is important. This is because it is crucial that every user gets out of the building or to a safe place in the building. Thus also the persons with disabilities or the non-ambulatory people. Regulations such as building codes can be used to minimize the negative consequences of the threat, triggering the evacuation and optimize the need to self-evacuate without causing alarm. Proper planning that covers designated actions to ensure safety of the users in emergencies will implement an all-hazards approach so that plans can be reused for multiple hazards that could exist. Therefore, key elements for emergency planning and preparedness are early warnings for the people inside the building by emergency helpers but also voice assistance, facilities to leave the building safe and fast, such as exit routes and good evacuation practices. The evacuation managing team must know what to do in emergency situations and which actions to take. The sequence of an evacuation can be divided into the following phases. The time for the first 4 phases is usually called pre-movement time. The particular phases are different for different objects. E.g., for ships a distinction between assembly and embarkation is made. These are separate from each other. The decision whether to enter the boats or rafts is thus usually made after assembly is completed. The strategy of individuals in evacuating buildings was investigated by John Abrahams in 1994. The independent variables were the complexity of the building and the movement ability of the individuals. With increasing complexity and decreasing motion ability, the strategy changes from fast egress through slow egress and move to safe place inside building to stay in place and wait for help. The third strategy is the notion of using a designated, safe haven on the floor. This is a section of the building that is reinforced to protect against specific hazards, such as fire, smoke or structural collapse. Some hazards may have safe havens on each floor, while a hazard such as a tornado may have a single safe haven or safe room. Typically, persons with limited mobility are requested to report to a safe haven for rescue by first responders. In most buildings, the safe haven will be in the stairwell. By investing the strategy of individuals in evacuating buildings, the variable human reactions is a complex factor to take into account during an evacuation. This is a critical factor for escaping fast out of the building or to a safe haven. During an emergency evacuation, people do not immediately react after hearing the alarm signal. This is because an evacuation drill is more common. Therefore, they will start evacuating when there is more information given about the degree of danger. During an evacuation, people often use the most known escape route. This is often the route through which they entered the building. Thereby, people mostly adapt the role follower in emergencies. These human reactions will determine the strategy of individuals in evacuating buildings. The most common equipment in buildings to facilitate emergency evacuations are fire alarms, exit signs, and emergency lights. Some structures need special emergency exits or fire escapes to ensure the availability of alternative escape paths. Commercial passenger vehicles such as buses, boats, and aircraft also often have evacuation lighting and signage, and in some cases windows or extra doors that function as emergency exits.